All right, what's going on, everyone? Bryce Gelman here for another live stream today to discuss. Yeah, we're going to talk about it. Isaiah Hartenstein has decided to sign with the Oklahoma City Thunder. He got the bag. He's going to get paid even more than Jalen Brunson this next year. So he got an offer he couldn't refuse. He took it. And as it has gone today, it has been the worst day that the Knicks have had all offseason. And that's an understatement. The fact that you wake up this morning to the news, the inevitable news that Paul George was going to sign with the Sixers. He signs with the Sixers. And then, of course, just about an hour and a half ago, Isaiah Hartenstein is going to Oklahoma City to play for a Thunder team, in my opinion, the best team in all of the Western Conference. And it's not even close. When you look at what those teams at the top of the Western Conference have lost, specifically the Nuggets and losing KCP, the Clippers are now a shell of themselves. The Oklahoma City Thunder just retooled, refueled, and they kept all of their draft assets. They didn't give up any of their stash of picks. They could still go all in for a superstar player and keep the core they have right now. They are a scary team for the next 10 years. By far the most likely team to be a dynasty, because the Boston Celtics, of course, with all the money they are paying their main guys, that could implode at any point. I don't think it will. I think that they will compete for a championship the next 4 or 5 years, but it could implode at any point, and it's highly reliant on the play of Kristaps Porzingis. If any team is reliant on what Kristaps Porzingis brings for you, and then of course how frequently he plays on the court, that could be a problem. But they just, and here's another thing, another piece of bad news for the Knicks is the Celtics just got Derek White on a major bargain. 4 years, $130 million, roughly. It's just like, how much more bad news can the Knicks take today? They got Mikal Bridges, and just the second they got him, Ian Begley tweets out, the Knicks are probably not going to re-sign Isaiah Hartenstein. So from the start, your expectations were hampered, right? Like these expectations that the Knicks could compete for a championship just automatically like that are back down. The ceiling of the Knicks just came down ever so slightly. And of course, I think that they could compete for a championship. I think that they could realistically make the finals. I don't think that that's a long shot. And I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility that the Knicks could compete with Boston and now Philadelphia. And we'll get to the Sixers later. I want to talk about that and that move that they made to bring in Paul George, the re-signing of Tyrese Maxey, the re-signing of Kelly Oubre. They retooled just as OKC did, and now they're looking like the second or third best team in the East. It's whether or not you think the Knicks are better or the Sixers are better at this point, because Boston, they won the championship. They deserve to be number one. They brought back all their guys. They're in a great position, paying every one of their top players for the next few years. So Boston's there, of course. I mean, they've just, that team is the best team on paper since the Warriors back in the day. So that is where we are at right now. But I wanted to just discuss this deal for Isaiah Hartenstein and just say this. Good for Isaiah Hartenstein. This was an offer he couldn't refuse. 3 years, $87 million, a front-loaded deal. The third year not guaranteed either way. 2 years of this deal, $58 million. That almost equals, it's $14 million less than what the Knicks could have offered him over 4 years. How could he have turned that down? And to sweeten the deal, he's going to be playing for arguably the best team in the NBA. A team that just brought in Alex Caruso. A team that just brought in him. A team that still possesses all of this treasure trove of draft picks that they could wield at any point to trade for a star player. So I think, objectively, the Thunder are the best position in the NBA going forward. Is there really any doubt about it? You've got a top 7 or 8 player in the NBA in SGA. You've got Jalen Williams, who's blossoming into a star. You've got Chet Holmgren, who you can't really count out in terms of the top, big threes in the league. He's a great third option. And then you got to look to the bench. Cason Wallace, Alex Caruso, Lou Dort. They are defensively a juggernaut. And they have the offensive pieces required to be a contender in the NBA. And of course, as I mentioned before, the Nuggets just got a little worse. And that was going to be their main competition. The Timberwolves are, can they replicate the success they had last year? That remains to be seen. Will the Mavericks be able to get back to that point? Will Luka Doncic actually get into better shape and come out firing on all cylinders next year? These are all major question marks. But the one thing that is certain in the Western Conference is the Thunder are here, and they are here to stay, with Isaiah Hartenstein now anchoring down that defense. And good for him, good for the Thunder as well. You can't be mad at the guy for taking a better contract. I understand if the money was closing, and even after it's been reported, and this shouldn't be a shock to anyone, that Hartenstein mulled over both deals for a while. He thought about it. It was a tough decision for him. But his agent, his wife, to be fair, his wife might have been the one pushing back on it. She's got the modeling career. I think she enjoyed being in New York City, the spotlight that comes along with that, the potential brand deals, whatever you want to call that. But his agents had to have been sitting there like salivating at this offer. Like, are we really about to turn down this deal, Isaiah? And he didn't. He made the fiscal, smart, financial decision by coming back to a team, or by going to a team that offered him the bag, that gave him the bag. So good for Hartenstein. And now for the Knicks, you have to look to pivot. And it's like every single option that has been floated for the Knicks has come off the board. It's like rapid fire. Every time you look at your phone, one of these centers that the Knicks could potentially go out and grab is gone. So they're going to have to make a move today or tomorrow. Realistically, with how fast these guys are going, with other teams circling the market for centers, the Knicks have to make a move. So let's talk about some of these potential replacements. And of course, none of these guys match up to what Isaiah Hartenstein gave you, specifically on the defensive end and offense too. How many big men facilitators are in the NBA? There's a handful. I can count on one hand, how many of those guys there are. So whatever. But let's talk about Goga Bitadze, who was on the Magic last year. He's the name that's actually been rumored a lot. A couple of guys that we'll touch on here. There hasn't been anything linking the Knicks to said player. Of course, there really isn't much, I'd say, leakage when it comes to the Knicks camp. Like, they don't give out information. If there's information out there, they probably leaked it themselves. If not, we're not going to find out about it until we get the notification from Woj or Shams. But Goga Bitadze, he is, I think, the best option here. He averaged 5 points and 4.6 rebounds per game and just over 15 minutes per game for the Magic last year. He kind of blossomed into that backup center role after he started his career with the Pacers. And listen, we're grasping at straws right here. Whoever could back up Mitchell Robinson efficiently and effectively will be a good sign in the eyes of the Knicks fans and, of course, the media as well. But I don't think anything is going to compare to the 2-year, $18 million deal the Knicks gave Isaiah Hartenstein 2 years ago. I don't think the Knicks are going to be able to find that level of production. But when you look at a guy like Goga Bitadze, defensively, he is an enticing option for them. Listen, again, no one is Isaiah Hartenstein out there, especially on the offensive end. But in a small sample size, when you got a small sample size with Hartenstein, even though he did play a lot for the Clippers, but he never played as much as he did for the Knicks to bring up his value as much as he did. But when you look at a guy like Goga Bitadze, only 15 minutes per game. Like, there's so much room for improvement. And one tweak of the leg to Mitchell Robinson, and someone's going to have to step up. And I think Goga can, as a guy, he was brought in for basically nothing from the Pacers to the Magic, not expected to play much, and ended up playing a lot over Mo Bamba and alongside Mo Wagner. Speaking of Mo Wagner, I think Mo Wagner is a really good option here. Does he want to stay with the Magic and stay with his brother Franz? That remains to be seen. But Mo Wagner, again, another guy who hasn't really played much, hasn't gotten the opportunity that he probably deserves, but per 36 minutes, the guy's an efficient, effective scorer. Average over 10 points per game on only 18 minutes per game. So do the math. Like 22 points per game per 36 minutes. Of course, he's not going to get those type of minutes on the Knicks, even if Mitchell Robinson gets hurt. Either way, he's a guy who could shoot the three. He's a type of guy that you want to see become more efficient from beyond the arc, hasn't shot over 35% in his career from three, but it's someone who does take threes. He's not afraid to shoot them. And the spacing that Hartenstein provided you, of course, he wasn't, a guy that you had to really watch out for on the perimeter, but his ball handling ability and his floater game really helped the Knicks space the way they really need to, especially with the guys on the roster, especially with all of those guys, especially in the playoffs with Josh Hart on the court, when there wasn't really any respect from opposing defenses to Josh Hart on the three-point line. But you had to respect Isaiah Hartenstein, who could catch the ball, get into the paint, and put up his patented floater. That's not an option for the Knicks anymore. So they need to find a guy who can space out the floor, a guy in which, again, I trust Julius Randle, not as a five, but as a bully down low, not as a paint protector that's going to change the game or is going to change the outlook of these Knicks, but someone who could bully down low, someone who could be a body in the paint as long as he's not guarding an opposing power forward who is a stretch four, and he's got to stay out on the perimeter the entire game. And even in that case, you can match up Julius Randle with the opposing center and put Batadze on the power forward. But we are, again, I don't. Mitchell Robinson is the starter for this Knicks team. When the Knicks re-signed Mitchell Robinson to 4 years, $60 million, that was the Knicks starting center. The Knicks still have their starting center. So before we go all scorched earth and we get all upset, I mean, you could fairly be upset about losing Isaiah Hartenstein, but the Knicks still have their starting center. A guy in which, when the Knicks signed Isaiah Hartenstein in the first place, they still expected Mitch to be that guy. And it only changed after Mitch had injury after injury after injury. The first year, Mitchell Robinson was still the starting center. When Mitchell Robinson was healthy, he still played just as many, if not more minutes than Isaiah Hartenstein when healthy. Just look at game one of the Eastern Conference playoffs in the first round against the Philadelphia 76ers. Who was the most efficient defender against Joel Embiid? It was Mitchell Robinson. Mitchell Robinson is a menace on the defensive end. Before he hurt at the start, like 15, 20 games into this past season, he was outpacing like half the league in offensive rebounds. He had a legitimate defensive player of the year argument to be made at that point in the year. If he played the entire year, I think he's the defensive player of the year with how good the Knicks defense was, especially after they got OG Anunoby. Can you imagine those two together for 2/3 of the season? He could have been defensive player of the year. So before we lose our marbles over the loss of Isaiah Hartenstein, Mitchell Robinson is still the starting center for this Knicks team. And that's always been the plan just until this offseason. After what we saw in the playoffs, after what we saw after Mitchell Robinson got hurt. Isaiah Hartenstein was probably the second most valuable player to the Knicks all season long last year. He's the reason why the Knicks, alongside Jalen Brunson, were the second seed in the Eastern Conference. And you also got to thank Precious Achiuwa for that, who stepped in for Julius Randle. And speaking of Precious Achiuwa, the Knicks could just re-sign him and run it back with him. As shaky as he looked in the playoffs against the Pacers, he couldn't even be an option at that point. The Knicks had no choice but to play him with the lack of depth that they had, but he looked shaky up until game 5 of that series. He just was not able to find his footing the way that they would have wanted him to. And I think at the end of the day, that kind of helped, because let's say Precious Achiuwa had this awesome series against the Pacers. He's getting paid by another team. The Knicks didn't offer the qualifying offer to Precious Achiuwa. So Precious Achiuwa is now an unrestricted free agent, but they could still pay him a solid amount. And that remains to be seen. It's another option. It's another guy. And so I got to check. Wow. And this is breaking news we got here. The Celtics majority ownership group is looking to sell the team. Wow. Wow, not seeing that coming. I'm sorry to get off topic here, but you got to react to news like that. I mean, that's a bomb. Who's trying to sell the Celtics? Who's trying to? Wow. That's crazy. I touch more on that maybe later or another time, but that's crazy. I had to react to that. Always got to be checking out for breaking news at this time of the year from Shams and Woj. But Fresh Chua is a solid option for this Knicks team. And of course, it gives them the flexibility to make a move at the trade deadline if they want to, if they want to reestablish that front court depth that they had with Isaiah Hartenstein. They still possess a good amount of picks. They still have they have all of their guys under contract for the next few years. Jalen Brunson needs to sign that extension. I don't know. As much as I think that Jalen Brunson is this team player that wants to do what's right for the franchise, look at what these guys have been paid. You really think Jalen Brunson, and Julius Randle too, is going to take a 5-year, $157 million deal when next offseason, he can get paid $50 million more, maybe even more? As much as that's been reported and as accepted of a possibility as it is, you just got to think that that's less and less likely considering the amount of money thrown at guys who are much worse than Jalen Brunson. Tyrese Maxey is up there. He's getting 5 years, $250 million. Emmanuel Quickley, 5 years, $175 million. Jalen Brunson's going to get paid less than that? Jalen Brunson's the top 10 player in the NBA, top 15. We're being realistic. I don't want to have this argument with fans out there who don't think Brunson's top 10. I think he is. But objectively, he's top 15. There's no doubt about it. There's no fighting it. The Knicks are in a tough position. They're in a tricky spot right now. With all the money that they are due to owe to the guys on this roster, even with all the favorable contracts that they have, it's still very tricky with this new CBA. And unfortunately, the new CBA is exactly why the Knicks weren't able to give Isaiah Hartenstein more than 4 years, $72 million. And of course, at the time when the news of the new CBA came out, Knicks fans of teams that haven't really had much success in the past were probably thrilled at that. The NBA is finally going to hold teams who have been able to pay all their guys, eat into the luxury tax, pay millions of dollars in the tax per year, but still stay at the top of the league. I think a lot of people were excited about that. Seeing the Warriors constantly up there in their salary and just constantly able to pay their guys and compete for championships. I just think this is a little extreme. And of course, I'm a little biased in saying that, considering the fact that Knicks weren't just able to re-sign Isaiah Hartenstein because of it. But hey, if you want to chime in here and let me know what you think of this situation, who you want the Knicks to go out and get as a backup center to Mitchell Robinson, a guy who's going to have to inevitably start at some point in the season if we're being realistic about Mitchell Robinson. He's a guy who cannot stay healthy. Just always going down with knee injuries, leg injuries, you name it. So let me know in the comment section who you think the Knicks should go out and get as a backup center option. Let's talk about one more guy. And it's certainly an intriguing option. That's James Wiseman, who most recently played for the Detroit Pistons, where he actually showed a semblance of competency for the first time in his career. Of course, Wiseman was the second overall selection in the 2020 draft to the Golden State Warriors in what is looking like one of the biggest busts in recent draft history, with LaMelo Ball still on the board for the Warriors. And of course, with where they were as a franchise, still competing for championships. Of course, they didn't win one until 2 years after, but the year before, they were in the finals. And I understand they lost Kevin Durant, but they still won 2 years later. So they could have reasonably moved down in that draft, established some more assets. They could have moved down in the draft after that. They didn't. I digress. But James Wiseman at 7 feet, 250, he is very intriguing. He's a guy who has an offensive game. He's got potential still. He's not that old of a guy. Do you go out and take a flyer on James Wiseman? It's an interesting proposition when you consider the fact that this Knicks team is ready to compete for a championship today. Do you take a guy in which you really have no idea what he could be? A rebuilding team does. They throw the money at James Wiseman. They see what he could be. They see if he could build his value up before the trade deadline, and then they trade him out. They ship him out for assets. That's what another team would do. And that's probably the type of team that's interested in James Wiseman right now. But realistically, what other options do the Knicks have? So what, you take a flyer on James Wiseman, he doesn't turn out to be exactly what you wanted him to be. There's inevitably going to be one or two names in the buyout market. And the Knicks have catapulted themselves into that discussion where, let's say, I don't know, so like Brook Lopez wants out. He gets bought out from the Milwaukee Bucks. He wants to chase one last ring. And I know I'm completely spitballing. I just named the first big man that came to mind, first old big man. The Knicks are going to be a front runner to sign anyone on the buyout market later on in the year. So let's say you bring in James Wiseman. He doesn't turn out to be the guy, this reclamation project that you want him to be. You ship him out, whatever, okay? And you create one roster spot in which you go out and get someone on the buyout market. So be it. Low risk, medium reward, maybe even high reward. The second overall pick. Some people thought he was the most talented player, the highest potential player in that draft. A draft in which included Anthony Edwards as the top overall selection. So, I get. We're running out of options here. The Knicks need to make a move. They got to do it. And if it happens and I missed it because I'm on Do Not Disturb, let me know in the comments. Because anything can happen at any point. The Knicks don't have time to sit back on their hands and not make a move here. I understand that there are limitations with the cap and they still have to figure out the Mikal Bridges deal, but you worry about that later. Bring in a center. No excuses. This center depth is completely shored up. The front court depth. Who do you have behind Julius Randle? You got to play Josh Hart at the 4 again? I guess that gets him more minutes at the end of the day, but we saw how exposed the Knicks got against the Pacers with Josh Hart at the 4. He could not guard Pascal Siakam. In an inevitable matchup against the Oklahoma City Thunder, do you think he could guard Chet Holmgren? He may be just as strong as him, but does he have the height? No. Josh Hart is 6'4". That cannot be your backup power forward. Precious Achiuwa, you bring him in, he can be your backup center and your backup power forward at the same time. He'll get 20 minutes per game. I think he is shown to be a very competent Tom Thibodeau type player. A hard-nosed, defensive-minded guy who's also got some offensive game because he has some explosiveness at the power forward center position. I want to see the Knicks bring back Precious Achiuwa. That's my number one option. Gogo Patadze would be another good option, another serviceable option. Why not both? Why not bring the both of them in? The Knicks don't really have much maneuverability with the cap. I don't know how much they could pay both of those guys. It remains to be seen. But why not? Or get a couple of guys at the veterans minimum who you think can contribute. I don't know. I'm spitballing here. But let's go to our last topic of the day. And that's, of course, the 76ers making the major splash and bringing in Paul George, the 34-year-old, to a 4-year, $210 million deal. Yes, the 76ers were backed into a corner with the moves that the Knicks made, with how good Boston was and how dominating they were in the Eastern Conference playoffs. And they go out and they pay Paul George, who's 34 years old, $50+ million per year. Wow. Wow, ladies and gentlemen. We can say that we saw this coming. The second that the talks between the Clippers and Paul George broke down, you kind of knew where this was heading. Either Paul George was headed to Orlando, or more likely, he was headed to Philadelphia with as much cap room as any other team in the NBA. Good for the 76ers. Congratulations. You are now paying a guy who is 34 years old. I understand he's still a very, very talented player in the NBA. Okay? He played 70 plus games this past year for the first time since 2018, 2019, when he was on the Thunder, before he went to the Clippers. Maybe the water is different in Philadelphia than it is in Los Angeles. Maybe he'll be a little less injury prone in Philadelphia. I think that's a lot to ask for. When your top two options, your two of your top three options, Joel Embiid, doesn't even need to be said about his injury history, and Paul George, who, like I just said, just played 70 or more games for the first time in 5 seasons. Congratulations, though. The 76ers on paper are either the second or third best team in the NBA now. They had no other option other than making this deal. It's not like they have this treasure trove of assets. I mean, they're not lacking in the assets department. They didn't have to give up all their picks or whatever. They made some solid moves. I mean, of course, the James Harden, like, there are some moves that they've had to make that, you know, that have taken up some of the picks they've had, but they still have the majority of their picks, if not more. They still have those picks. They signed Paul George. When you sign a guy, you don't have to give any picks, of course. You don't need me to tell you that. So the 76ers versus the Knicks is going to be a very interesting matchup 4 times this upcoming season. And then if they match up in the playoffs again, I think the Knicks are better. Even after not bringing back Isaiah Hartenstein. You saw how well they matched up against the Sixers in this past playoffs, right? You saw how much even at that point when the Knicks had halfway through the series, they lost Bojan Bogdanovic, they lost their depth. Josh Hart was playing 45 plus minutes a game. Dante DiVincenzo was playing 40 minutes a game. Those guys are coming off the bench. Those are the Knicks' bench options. The Sixers do not have anywhere near the level of depth that the Knicks have. Deuce McBride, by the way, is a Sixers killer. He feasts on the Sixers. He was such a good option to go to in that series. He was one of the main difference makers in that series. I think the Knicks win in 6 games. I don't think anything's changed. Yes, Joel Embiid wasn't at 90 or 100%. That's almost an impossible ask at that point of the season. The Sixers fans, the media wanted to point at the fact that Embiid wasn't 100%. He was never getting to that point. So what's the point of even entertaining the question? The Knicks didn't have Julius Randle. The Knicks just added Mikal Bridges too. And they're going to add Julius Randle. The Sixers just added Paul George. And congratulations to them. They re-signed Kelly Oubre. I think that was a great re-signing. They had the money to do it, and they did it. Kelly Oubre's got length. You know who's also got length? Someone who just entered the Knicks starting rotation is Mikal Bridges. The Knicks are a scary team, a very underrated team. I don't think you realize what happened to the Phoenix Suns after they lost Mikal Bridges. Defense sucked. It's nowhere near as good. Of course, they didn't have the playmaking that Chris Paul provided them. Because Chris Paul wasn't at any point waning in his career in that season in 2021. He was still a very solid option at point guard, a great facilitator, whatever, you name it. You strip Mikal Bridges from that team, you add Kevin Durant, the whole dynamic of the team changed. They were nowhere near as good. So keep underrating the Knicks. They have the 2 best defensive wings, 2 of the best. OG Anunoby is the best defensive wing in the NBA. You can make the argument for Mikal Bridges being top 3, but he's definitely top 5 defensive wing. The Knicks have 2 of the top 5 defensive wings in the NBA. Good luck. Good luck, Paul George. Good luck, Kelly Oubre. And they also have the guy down low who did the best job defensively against Joel Embiid that we've seen anyone do all season long. People forget Mitchell Robinson was hurt too. The 2 of them were both limping. They were both limited in what they can provide on the court, and Mitchell Robinson still dominated. I mean, of course, Joel Embiid is going to get his. He's always going to get his. He's always going to foul bait and whatnot. But Mitchell Robinson still was a very solid defensive option on Joel Embiid. The Knicks match up extremely well against the 76ers. It's just the Boston Celtics that everyone's chasing. And they're just able to pay everyone. I don't know how it works. I cannot begin to explain that to you, but they just do. All right, that'll do it for today's live stream. Really have no idea what this week's schedule is going to look like. Of course, with it being 4th of July week. Happy 4th of July, everyone. Tomorrow night, be sure to tune in to One Giant Step. It's back. Sean Morash and I are going to be reacting to the first episode of the first ever off-season Hard Knocks, and it's with the New York Giants. It's going to be fun. It's going to be enjoyable. I'm excited to get back to talking Giants with Sean Morash of WFAN. That will be released wherever you get your podcast. I'll put that out on my Twitter, so stay tuned for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. So I will speak to you all tomorrow night with One Giant Step, but on this YouTube channel and on my X Twitter page later on this week. Happy 4th of July, everyone. Hope you have a great week. Enjoy the barbecues with your family. Enjoy the great weather. And I will speak to you all very soon.